They laughed at humans. They called us weak, insignificant, a species not worth noticing. Across the galaxy, civilizations treated Earth as a mere footnote, a small whisper in the void. And yet, here we are. One human, standing on the edge of the unknown, staring down a fleet that could erase entire planets. One human who would show the universe that courage and ingenuity cannot be measured by size or power. Captain Elias Kane. By the time the galaxy realizes what it has dismissed, they will remember our name. The stars beyond the viewport shimmered like scattered jewels in the black velvet of space. Elias Kane leaned forward, his hands resting lightly on the cold steel of the command console, eyes scanning the distant horizon where the enemy fleet approached. Massive dreadnoughts glided through the void with terrifying precision, engines glowing with energy that could melt continents, weapons capable of annihilating entire worlds. Panic had spread through the colonies days ago, yet Elias's mind was calm, calculating, alive with possibilities the aliens could never imagine. They had underestimated humans before. They thought predictable, measured, and arrogant. They believed that the scattered colonies of Earth could never coordinate, could never fight back with strategy and intelligence. And yet, in the shadows of the void, human ingenuity was quietly assembling a symphony of defiance. Small ships, barely visible from this distance, moved in formation across the asteroid belt, weaving between rocks, nebula gases, and cosmic debris, appearing and disappearing as though ghosts had taken shape in space. Elias's voice was soft but steady. All units, hold formation. Engage stealth protocols. Wait for my mark. The crew, trained and disciplined beyond measure, executed each maneuver with silent precision. No fear lingered here, not in the bridge, not in the corridors, not in the hearts of those who had survived countless trials. The Empire, they thought, would see scattered humans fleeing in terror. They would see weakness. They would be wrong. As the alien fleet advanced, its formation stretching across the star system like a living, metallic serpent, Elias considered the possibilities. Dreadnoughts were powerful, but predictable. They moved according to doctrine, relying on overwhelming force rather than cunning. And humans thrive in unpredictability. The first strike would come not from raw power, but from clever misdirection. The asteroid belt ahead was a trap, a canvas upon which humanity would paint its first stroke of rebellion. Small human fighters darted like sparks through the swirling chaos, weaving in and out of the rocky labyrinth. Mines, designed to trigger at specific frequencies, detonated in carefully timed sequences. Alien cruisers, confident in their superiority, were caught in a ballet of destruction. One by one, ships exploded in brilliant bursts of light, torn apart by ingenuity rather than firepower alone. Elias allowed himself a brief smile. Victory in this encounter was minor, but it was proof, a proof that humans cannot be dismissed. The Empire's generals, far from Earth, would receive reports of the unexpected losses and furrow their brows in disbelief. Intelligence underestimated, arrogance misjudged. Humanity had the upper hand where the enemy did not even realize the game had begun. Yet, the cost of defiance was already evident. Communication from a distant colony crackled through the console. Fear, desperation, whispers of surrender. Not all humans were united. Some had not yet learned to trust ingenuity over fear. Elias pressed a hand to the console, heart tightening as he listened to the faint panic in the voice of the officer reporting the situation. Betrayal, he thought. It was inevitable. Fear was humanity's oldest enemy, and it crept quietly, insidious, into hearts already battered by isolation and despair. But Elias did not waver. Humanity had endured before against threats far greater than the Empire's fleet. And now, that resilience would rise again. He focused on the map before him, calculating angles, distances, timings. The enemy believed they were unstoppable, that humans would scatter like leaves before the wind. They had no idea that strategy, adaptability, and courage were weapons the Empire could not anticipate. The first human fleet strike had been executed with near perfection. Now came the next phase. Larger ships, carrying heavier weaponry, and crews trained in war fighting for decades, approached from multiple vectors. The enemy believed that quantity equaled dominance, that human resistance would crumble under pressure. But Elias knew the truth. Brilliance could overcome numbers. Innovation could defeat sheer force. Each ship, each crew member, acted in concert with a singular purpose: defend humanity, no matter the cost. Explosions lit the void as alien cruisers collided with the traps laid by human ingenuity. Laser fire ricocheted through asteroid fields, illuminating the dark canvas of space with flashes of red, blue, and white. Small human fighters darted between the chaos, striking at weak points, then vanishing into the shadows. And above it all, Elias's voice guided them, calm, precise, unwavering. Every command calculated, every movement deliberate. The enemy, for all their technological might, could not comprehend the dance of unpredictability they had stumbled into. In the midst of this, a message arrived from one of the outer colonies. Elias recognized the subtle tremor in the voice, the unspoken plea for mercy. Fear had reached their hearts. And then, the betrayal became clear. A supposedly allied fleet had abandoned formation, leaving a critical pathway open to the enemy. Human ships were caught in crossfire, forced to maneuver frantically to avoid annihilation. One by one, they dodged, fired, and survived, but the price was visible in the twisted hulls of ships, in the loss of comrades, in the weight of responsibility that pressed upon Elias's shoulders. He clenched his fists. Sacrifice was inevitable. Loss was inevitable. But surrender? Never. Humanity had never surrendered. And in the void, across the silent distances of space, human spirit burned brighter than the combined engines of the Empire's fleet. The first wave of alien reinforcements arrived, enormous ships bristling with weapons that could shatter planets. And yet, humanity held. Tactical retreats, feints, ambushes, they were methods the aliens had not accounted for. Patterns broken, predictability shattered. Small human ships slipped through corridors of space that the Empire had deemed impenetrable. And every strike, every maneuver, carried with it the echo of a species underestimated for far too long. Elias's mind raced. Plans within plans, contingencies layered upon contingencies. The Empire had calculated probabilities, assumed obedience to patterns. Humanity operated outside patterns. Each ship, each fighter, was a question mark, a variable the enemy could not compute. And as the dreadnoughts advanced, as the weapons hummed with destructive energy, Elias smiled. Let them underestimate. Let them assume. The first lesson of this engagement had been taught in the fire of the asteroid belts. Humans were unpredictable. Humans were clever. Humans survived. Across the galaxy, somewhere in the command chambers of the Empire, officers would soon realize their arrogance had blinded them. Reports of ships disappearing, systems failing, strategies faltering would arrive in a flood of disbelief. And still, Elias knew this was only the beginning. The human story was far from complete. For every loss, every sacrifice, humanity gained experience, insight, and resolve. And the day would come when the Empire would learn a truth it had never imagined. To dismiss humans was to court disaster. Even now, in the bridge of a small ship, surrounded by glowing consoles and the low hum of engines, Elias Kane prepared for the next move. The Empire believed they were in control. They did not see the full picture. They did not understand the depth of human ingenuity, the fire of human courage, the unyielding determination that had carried a species from fragile beginnings to the edge of the stars. And in the quiet moments between calculations, between maneuvers, Elias allowed himself one thought. The galaxy had not yet seen what humans were capable of. And they never would forget it. Asterisk. The asteroid belts had done their work, scattering the first wave of alien cruisers into chaos. Yet the Empire was relentless. Their reinforcements arrived in staggered formations, enormous ships bristling with weapons that seemed to hum with malice. Elias Kane watched the void beyond the viewport, eyes narrowed, calculating. The humans were outnumbered 10-1. Yet each human pilot understood what raw numbers could never measure: strategy, cunning, and resolve. In the silent expanse of space, humans were not just surviving, they were thriving, turning disadvantage into opportunity. The first skirmishes of this second wave were brutal. Alien ships advanced with methodical precision, expecting humans to falter under pressure. Yet the humans anticipated every move. Small fighter ships darted between colossal cruisers, striking at weak points that the enemy did not even know existed. Mines detonated in careful sequences, and explosions illuminated the cold darkness with bursts of red and gold. Each strike, each maneuver, carried with it the weight of centuries of survival, the brilliance of minds honed under pressure, the courage that only a species pushed to the edge could muster. Elias's ship moved like a shadow among the chaos. Every console flashed with telemetry, enemy movement, and the status of allied ships. He gave his orders not with panic, but with quiet authority, his voice calm, steady, imbued with a certainty that inspired confidence. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Sweep Sector Delta. Target enemy weapon nodes. Avoid frontal engagement. Each command was executed flawlessly, each movement calculated to exploit weaknesses invisible to the enemy. The alien commanders could not comprehend it. They were masters of discipline, yes, but bound by patterns, doctrine, and predictability. Humans had none of that. The human fleet's first major strike came in the form of a coordinated ambush. Using the shadows of a dense nebula, small human fighters approached from multiple vectors, converging on a single alien cruiser. The assault was surgical. Energy shields were breached at calculated intervals, weapon systems disrupted by clever hacking drones, and within minutes, the cruiser erupted in a spectacular display of fire and debris. Human pilots weaved through the destruction with precision, barely a scratch on their ships, leaving the enemy commanders in shock. The galaxy had never seen such audacity from humans. Reports would later describe the strikes as impossible, the tactics inexplicable. Elias allowed himself no pride. The human fleet's victories were hard-won and costly. Already, the toll of battle became apparent. Minor mistakes resulted in the loss of a ship here, a damaged cruiser there. The enemy's sheer volume of firepower could not be ignored, and Elias knew this was just the beginning. Yet every loss, every challenge, strengthened resolve rather than breaking it. Communications across the fleet crackled intermittently. Reports of victory, pleas for assistance, and occasional cries of despair created a constant symphony of urgency. The humans adapted with remarkable speed, reorganizing formations, rerouting resources, and improvising solutions in real time. Where the aliens relied on pre-programmed sequences and protocol, humans relied on quick thinking, adaptability, and teamwork. It was not a fair fight in terms of technology, but humans were unmatched in creativity and willpower. Among the fleet, a young pilot named Soren Vega distinguished himself. Small, agile, and fearless, Soren navigated his fighter through the gaps between enemy cruisers, planting charges with pinpoint accuracy before darting away. Each successful strike was a testament to human ingenuity, a spark of hope in the dark expanse. And yet, with each maneuver, the cost became visible. Debris from destroyed cruisers tore through space, threatening to annihilate human craft if timing faltered by even a fraction of a second. The pilots were acutely aware of the stakes, and still, they pressed on. Elias monitored the tactical map, noting the positions of the remaining enemy ships. The Empire had learned quickly from the first wave, adapting their formations to anticipate human unpredictability. Yet each adjustment was countered by humans improvising new strategies. Battles became a dance of shadows and fire, of patience and aggression, where every movement had consequences. For the humans, this was not merely survival. It was proof of their resilience, a declaration that they would not bow, that they would not be erased. During a brief lull in the fighting, Elias reflected on the nature of the conflict. The Empire was vast, their resources nearly limitless, yet humanity had something they could not calculate: courage born of necessity, creativity born of desperation, and a stubborn refusal to surrender. Every human ship, every pilot, every strategist in the fleet carried the weight of history, of survival against insurmountable odds. And with every engagement, humanity was proving that the galaxy had underestimated them at its peril. But not all humans were immune to fear. Reports of a colony abandoning defensive protocols reached Elias. Panic had crept into hearts untested by the fires of battle, and the betrayal was a sharp reminder of humanity's fragility. One human fleet had turned, leaving gaps in the defenses, exposing Allied ships to enemy fire. Elias's heart tightened, but he did not hesitate. Immediate countermeasures were deployed. Human ingenuity compensated for fear, and the fleet adapted with astonishing speed. Sacrifice was inevitable, yet the mission persisted. Each life lost weighed against the survival of many more. The enemy, sensing unpredictability, intensified their assaults. Larger ships, heavily armed, advanced toward key strategic points in the fleet. And yet, humans continued to exploit every vulnerability. Improvised electronic warfare disrupted targeting systems, agile fighters hit exposed power conduits, and the human fleet's coordination defied logic. Each success emboldened the humans and further disoriented the aliens. They began to doubt their calculations, their plans, their confidence. And that doubt, though imperceptible, became a weapon in itself. Among the human ships, small skirmishes became legendary feats. Vega Squadron intercepted a squadron of alien drones, their laser fire lighting the nebula like fireworks. Each pilot performed maneuvers that no simulation could predict. They struck in ways the enemy could not anticipate, vanishing into the shadows only to reappear where least expected. And through it all, Elias Kane guided them, not with brute force, but with precision, intuition, and calm authority. The second wave of the human offensive culminated in a daring assault on one of the Empire's forward command vessels. Human fighters slipped through defensive screens, disabled shields, and infiltrated critical systems. Explosions tore through the alien vessel's core as energy reserves destabilized. For a brief, shining moment, the human fleet held the upper hand. Victory was not total, losses had been suffered, but it was undeniable. Humanity had struck fear into the heart of the Empire. They had proven that strategy, courage, and adaptability could overcome overwhelming force. Elias allowed a fleeting smile. He knew the battle was far from over. The Empire's pride and resources were vast. But for now, humanity had sent a clear message. They were not to be dismissed, they were not to be underestimated, and the fires of defiance burned brighter than any star. Across the fleet, ships regrouped, repairs were made, and the humans prepared for the next engagement. And somewhere, far beyond the battlefield, alien commanders would begin to question their assumptions. They had underestimated the unyielding human spirit. They had assumed predictability. And they had failed to understand that within a species small in stature but vast in ingenuity, resilience, and courage could outshine even the deadliest fleets the galaxy had ever known. Asterisk. Victory had tasted sweet, but the aftertaste of loss was bitter. Across the human fleet, the echoes of battle lingered, not just in the twisted hulls of ships or the wreckage of destroyed alien cruisers, but in the hearts of those who had survived. Elias Kane moved through the bridge of his ship, observing the calculated chaos of recovery. Systems were repaired, shields reinforced, and the wounded tended with a quiet efficiency born of necessity. But even amidst the organized calm, a shadow of unease had settled. One of their own had betrayed them, leaving a critical gap in the defenses at a pivotal moment. The loss was tangible, and the betrayal stung sharper than any laser blast. Reports had come in, fragmented and jittered over communications channels. A fleet under their temporary command had deviated from orders, abandoning a strategic corridor and leaving Allied ships exposed. The outcome had been disastrous. A squadron of human fighters had been destroyed, others had barely survived, and the emotional toll rippled through the fleet. Elias listened in silence, heart tightening with each word. In battle, mistakes could be forgiven, errors expected, but betrayal was another matter entirely. It struck at the heart of trust, at the very foundation of cohesion that allowed humans to face an enemy that outnumbered them 100 to 1. Yet Elias understood the paradox. Fear was inevitable, and survival instincts could override reason. He had seen it before in colonies facing overwhelming odds, in officers pushed to the edge of endurance. The human spirit was resilient, but even the strongest could falter. And so, instead of fury, Elias focused on remedying the breach. Orders were issued to redistribute forces, to fortify vulnerable sectors, and to engage in calculated countermeasures. The fleet adapted with astonishing speed, reflecting a trait that aliens could not anticipate. Humans improvised, and in improvisation they found strength. Among the pilots, the grief was raw. Soren Vega, previously celebrated for daring maneuvers, had narrowly survived an ambush caused by the betrayal. Her fighter bore scorch marks, shield generators were operating at half capacity, and yet she continued to fly, rallying others with courage that defied exhaustion. Each survivor carried not only the memory of fallen comrades, but also a renewed sense of purpose. Humanity could grieve, but it did not stop. Humanity could be wounded, but did not surrender. And Elias, watching from the bridge, understood that the fleet's resilience was as much a weapon as any laser or missile. The Empire, sensing weakness, pressed its advantage. Enormous cruisers maneuvered to exploit gaps, weapons glinting in the dark light of distant stars. Yet humans had already adapted. Using a combination of guerrilla tactics and improvisation, smaller craft slipped between enemy lines, striking at weak points invisible to the invaders. Mines triggered at precise intervals, causing chain reactions that tore holes in alien formations. Human ingenuity was relentless, turning every setback into an opportunity, every failure into a lesson. The battle was no longer just a contest of firepower, it was a test of adaptability, creativity, and willpower. Elias coordinated attacks with near-prescient precision. He anticipated enemy responses, predicted movements, and issued orders that seemed almost impossible to execute. Yet the human pilots obeyed with the seamless coordination that had become their trademark. They did not question, they trusted, and that trust was the invisible thread weaving their strength together. When an enemy cruiser attempted a flank, they were met with a counter-ambush so perfectly timed it seemed preordained. Explosions illuminated the nebula, and human pilots weaved through debris like shadows, striking again and again with efficiency and precision. Amidst the chaos, Elias allowed himself a moment of reflection. Every loss, every scar, every narrow escape reminded him of the stakes. This was not a fight for territory, nor merely for survival. It was a declaration that humanity would not be ignored. And yet, the betrayal still lingered. He knew that to maintain cohesion, the fleet had to confront this failure head-on. Trust, once broken, had to be rebuilt. Orders were issued to locate and isolate the fleet responsible for the breach. They were not to be punished, Elias decided, but understood. Fear and desperation could lead even the bravest astray, and understanding was often the key to restoring unity. As the hours stretched into days, skirmishes continued across the sectors. Minor victories built morale, but they came at a cost. Human ships, though nimble and clever, were finite. Ammunition and energy reserves required careful management. Repairs had to be conducted under pressure, often while dodging enemy fire. And yet, the humans persevered. Every successful maneuver reinforced the idea that ingenuity could outmatch raw power, that creativity could neutralize numerical superiority. The Empire, despite its technological edge, could not predict every human choice, could not account for instinct, courage, and adaptability intertwined. During a particularly harrowing engagement, Vega's squadron faced annihilation at the hands of an overwhelming alien force. Shields flickered, energy weapons struck with devastating precision, and escape routes closed one after another. But even then, the humans did not panic. Vega improvised, coordinating with other pilots to create diversions, redirect enemy fire, and exploit structural weaknesses in the cruisers. The result was spectacular. Several alien vessels were disabled, human casualties were minimized, and the squadron emerged battered but victorious. Each maneuver, each decision, was a testament to the human mind under pressure, a mind unbound by protocol, driven by ingenuity, courage, and survival. Elias observed these events silently, noting patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities. Humans were resilient not because they lacked fear, but because they acted despite it. Fear sharpened perception, forced innovation, and inspired acts of courage that no alien doctrine could predict. This understanding became the foundation of his strategy. Push the humans to their limits, allow their ingenuity to flourish, and strike decisively when the enemy least expected it. Yet even amidst triumph, the shadow of sacrifice loomed. The fleet had lost dozens of ships, and the tally of human lives weighed heavily on Elias's conscience. Each loss was personal, each casualty a reminder that survival came at a price. And still, humanity endured. Humans did not succumb to despair. They adapted, repaired, and continued to fight. For every fallen pilot, another step forward, carrying their courage, their memory, and the unspoken promise that the fight would continue. The Empire, frustrated and increasingly desperate, began deploying experimental weapons, massive energy arrays, and automated drones designed to overwhelm human defenses. But the humans met every escalation with resourcefulness. Shields were reinforced with improvised modifications, energy reserves rerouted to maximize offensive output, and small craft executed coordinated strikes with deadly precision. Each encounter, no matter how deadly, reinforced a truth the aliens could not comprehend. Humans were unpredictable, inventive, and relentless. As the fleet pressed on, Elias made a decision that would define the next phase of the war. The humans would strike deeper into enemy territory, targeting command vessels and supply lines. It was a calculated risk, one that relied not on numbers but on strategy, timing, and the trust between pilots, engineers, and command officers. The move was audacious, bordering on madness, but it was exactly the kind of decision the Empire could not anticipate. And in audacity, humans found strength. The sun rose over distant planets, casting long shadows across the bridge of Elias's ship. The fleet, battered but unbroken, prepared for the next assault. Every human knew the stakes. Every pilot understood the risks, and yet none wavered. The spirit of defiance burned brighter than any star in the galaxy. And as Elias Kane looked out at the horizon, he realized that the battle was no longer merely about survival. It was about proving to the universe that humanity, underestimated for too long, could not be ignored, could not be defeated, and would leave an indelible mark on the cosmos. Asterisk. The remnants of the fleet moved with quiet determination, shadows of smoke and fire trailing behind them as they regrouped in the far reaches of the nebula. Elias Kane stood on the bridge of his ship, eyes scanning the constellation of enemy vessels ahead. The flagship, colossal and bristling with weapons, hung like a dark monolith against the star-strewn void. It was the heart of the Empire's offensive, the nexus of their command. And tonight, humanity would strike where the enemy least expected it. Every detail of the plan had been calculated, yet Elias knew the execution would rely on more than numbers or technology. It would rely on instinct, courage, and creativity. The human fleet, small but agile, prepared to split into multiple vectors. Fighters darted like shadows, each pilot understanding the audacity of what they were about to attempt. Mines, EMP devices, and improvised warheads were deployed along likely intercept courses. The plan was simple in its elegance: infiltrate the flagship, destabilize its command systems, and cripple the Empire's ability to coordinate the remaining fleet. Simplicity, however, belied the danger. One miscalculation could result in annihilation. The first wave moved silently through the nebula, cloaked from enemy sensors. Ships slipped between cosmic debris, weaving past patrols that assumed humans would flee, would scatter, would cower. They did not. They advanced with calculated confidence, and the darkness of space seemed to bend around their determination. Elias's ship led the formation, a shadow moving against a void, every flicker of light from the enemy a potential threat, every silence a trap waiting to spring. Within the flagship, corridors teemed with alien officers, the rhythm of their war machine unaware of the approaching storm. Small human fighters breached defensive perimeters, targeting power conduits and control nodes. Explosions rippled through the hull, lighting the corridors in bursts of red and white. Boarding parties, piloted by humans trained in infiltration and zero-gravity combat, moved with precision. Every action was deliberate, every step was measured. Aliens, confident in their technological superiority, were unprepared for the audacity of this strike. Elias coordinated the assault from the bridge, issuing commands with calm authority. Vega, take Squadron Delta through the secondary docking bay. Disable the shield generators. All others, engage tactical diversions. Timing is everything. The crew executed flawlessly, weaving between laser fire, debris, and collapsing structures. One by one, critical systems of the flagship were compromised. Power fluctuations spread across the decks, forcing alien officers to react, to scramble, to adapt. And in those moments, human ingenuity shone brightest. Improvised hacking drones disrupted targeting arrays. Nimble fighters planted charges in weak points identified through careful observation. The battle outside mirrored the chaos within. Alien cruisers attempted to flank the human fleet, but each movement was anticipated and countered. Fighters darted through beams of energy, weaving between explosions, exploiting every flaw in the enemy formation. Mines detonated with precise timing, sending shockwaves that tore through armored hulls. Every human maneuver, every calculated risk, reinforced the growing legend of a species underestimated and yet unrelenting. Amidst the mayhem, Elias allowed himself a brief moment to observe. The flagship was faltering. Command systems were destabilized. Shields flickered. Weapons arrays overloaded. And yet, the danger remained immense. One wrong move could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction, ending the lives of hundreds of humans and leaving the fleet vulnerable. He felt the weight of every decision, the responsibility of every pilot, every ship, every strategy. Fear was present, but it did not control him. It sharpened his senses, focused his mind, and reinforced the imperative to act decisively. Inside the flagship, human boarding teams encounter resistance unlike any before. Alien soldiers, trained for combat across countless star systems, engaged with lethal precision. But the humans adapted. Improvised tactics, environmental advantages, and unorthodox maneuvers allowed them to bypass superior firepower. Corridors became theaters of strategy, walls echoing with the sound of energy weapons and the clash of metal. Each victory, no matter how small, destabilized the flagship further, sending tremors through the alien command hierarchy. Outside, the human fleet exploited every opening. Laser fire targeted critical propulsion systems, forcing large cruisers to drift helplessly. Mines triggered chain reactions, decimating clusters of enemy ships. Fighters executed kamikaze-style maneuvers to disable weapons platforms, sacrificing ships when necessary to preserve the greater advantage. The level of coordination, courage, and ingenuity displayed was unprecedented. The Empire had expected human resistance to be desperate and disorganized. Instead, it was methodical, precise, and devastating. Vega Squadron, navigating the inner docking corridors, encountered the flagship's core energy conduits. Overheating systems sparked, fires ignited, and alarms blared throughout the vessel. Vega maneuvered her fighter with astonishing agility, planting charges that would destabilize the core without triggering immediate self-destruction. Each pulse of energy threatened to tear apart the ship, yet her skill, intuition, and courage ensured success. Outside, the fleet noticed the flagship beginning to falter, its weapons misfiring, shields flickering, command signals disrupted. Humanity had struck at the heart, and the enemy was beginning to crumble. Elias's voice rang through the comms. All units, hold formation. Maintain pressure. Strike decisively where weaknesses appear. Every pilot, every ship, responded instinctively. Explosions lit the void, creating a staccato rhythm of destruction and defiance. Human fighters darted between the chaos, delivering precise blows, vanishing before retaliation could strike. The enemy fleet, once confident and precise, began to fracture under the relentless unpredictability of human tactics. Inside the flagship, the humans reached the command center. Energy conduits sparked dangerously, screens flickered, and alien officers struggled to maintain control. Elias knew this was the pivotal moment. One final maneuver could collapse the enemy's command structure entirely, but required coordination, timing, and trust. Orders were issued, synchronized across multiple ships and boarding parties. The plan was audacious, bordering on impossible, but executed with the calm precision that had defined humanity's campaign so far. The moment of truth arrived. Charges detonated in a sequence that sent shockwaves through the flagship. Power systems collapsed, energy cores destabilized, and critical weapons arrays overloaded. Explosions tore through the hull, illuminating the void outside with brilliant bursts of fire and light. The enemy fleet, witnessing the flagship's failure, faltered. Orders were delayed, movements became disjointed, and confidence shattered. Humanity had struck the decisive blow, not through overwhelming force, but through precision, ingenuity, and unyielding. The flagship began to break apart, drifting helplessly as fires consumed its decks. Alien vessels scrambled to salvage what they could, but the damage was irreparable. The human fleet maintained pressure, ensuring no recovery was possible. One by one, enemy ships retreated, unable to counter the unpredictable brilliance of the humans. The battle, which had seemed unwinnable, was now turning in favor of a species that had been underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked. Elias allowed himself a rare moment of relief. The fleet had survived, the flagship was crippled, and humanity had delivered a message that could never be ignored. The price had been high, ships lost, lives sacrificed, but the victory was undeniable. Across the void, stars reflected the fires of battle, a testament to the courage, ingenuity, and relentless spirit of humanity. And as Elias looked to the horizon, he understood that this triumph was only the beginning. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again. Not now, not ever. Asterisk. The void had grown quiet. The fires of battle still lingered across distant nebulae and shattered cruisers, but the Empire's fleet had retreated, fractured, and humbled. Elias Kane stood on the bridge of his ship, gazing out at the stars now shining brighter than before, their light reflecting the courage and sacrifice of those who had endured the impossible. Humanity had won not by overwhelming firepower, not by sheer numbers, but through ingenuity, adaptability, and the unbreakable spirit that had carried them from fragile beginnings to the edge of the galaxy. The fleet, battered but unbroken, moved in formation through the remnants of the battlefield. Fires from destroyed alien ships lit the darkness in fiery streaks, reminders of the cost of defiance. Elias allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. Hundreds of lives had been lost. Ships that had carried generations of skill and courage were now drifting wrecks among the stars. Yet, despite the losses, humanity had survived. More than survived, they had triumphed. Across the command channels, voices crackled with relief, exhaustion, and triumph. Pilots recounted daring maneuvers, engineers reported successful repairs, and medical teams tended to the wounded with skill and care. The human fleet moved as one entity, cohesive and resilient, carrying with it a story of courage that would ripple across the galaxy. Every action, every sacrifice, every brilliant tactic had reinforced a truth the Empire could no longer ignore. Humans were not to be dismissed, not to be underestimated, and not to be conquered easily. Elias's gaze returned to the distant stars, where the remnants of the Empire's flagship drifted, powerless and broken. The colossal vessel, once a symbol of invincibility, now floated helplessly, a monument to the audacity, courage, and ingenuity of a species thought insignificant. The humans had struck at the heart of the Empire, destabilized its command, and emerged victorious. Yet Elias knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and threats would continue to emerge. Humanity's victories would inspire envy, fear, and retaliation. But the lesson had been made clear. The underestimated can be unstoppable, and the dismissed can leave an indelible mark on the stars. Among the fleet, celebrations were quiet but meaningful. Pilots shared stories of narrow escapes and clever maneuvers, engineers exchanged notes on improvisations that had turned the tide, and commanders reflected on the precision of coordination that had defined every engagement. Losses were mourned, but hope was rekindled. Humanity had endured, and endurance had brought triumph. And in every ship, from the smallest fighter to the largest cruiser, the spirit of defiance burned bright. Vega's squadron, battered yet unbowed, returned from a final sweep of enemy territory. The young pilot, once celebrated for daring maneuvers, now carried the weight of experience, of seeing comrades fall and understanding the true cost of defiance. And yet, courage remained. Humanity had not only survived, they had inspired one another, forged bonds that would carry them through the trials yet to come, and proven that ingenuity, courage, and adaptability were weapons no empire could fully predict or counter. Elias addressed the fleet, his voice carrying across communications channels. We have survived the impossible. We have faced an enemy that outnumbered us, outgunned us, and yet, through ingenuity, courage, and unity, we have prevailed. This victory is not the end, it is proof. Proof that humanity cannot be dismissed, cannot be conquered, and will continue to rise, no matter the odds. His words were met with silence at first, as crews absorbed the weight of triumph and loss alike. Then, slowly, cheers began to ripple across the fleet. Not loud, not reckless, but steadfast, an acknowledgement of what had been accomplished and what remained to be done. The Empire would remember this day. Across countless systems, reports would circulate of human audacity, of clever tactics that defied prediction, of courage that could not be extinguished. Commanders would rethink strategies, scientists would analyze maneuvers, and historians would mark the moment when humanity, dismissed and underestimated, had proven itself formidable. Elias knew that recognition was not enough. Preparation was vital. The galaxy would respond, and humanity had to be ready for what came next. In the quiet moments that followed, as repairs continued and ships reoriented toward safer sectors, Elias allowed himself a private reflection. The battle had been won, but victory was not about destruction. It was about survival, resilience, and proving that the human spirit could shine even in the darkness. Every sacrifice, every calculated risk, every act of ingenuity had reinforced the truth. Humans could defy expectation, overcome insurmountable odds, and inspire one another to greatness. And as he gazed out at the vast expanse of stars, Elias understood something profound. This victory was not merely about defeating an enemy. It was about setting a precedent, leaving a mark on the galaxy that could not be erased. Humanity would endure, would thrive, and would continue to challenge those who underestimated it. The stars, once distant and intimidating, now felt like allies, reflecting the fires of courage that burned within every human soul. Far across the void, alien forces regrouped, confused and humbled. Their calculations had failed, their expectations shattered. They had underestimated humans, assumed predictability where there was none, and in doing so, had faced humiliation and loss. Elias knew this would not be the last challenge, nor the last battle. But humanity had proven something critical. Intelligence, courage, and adaptability could turn the tide, could defy overwhelming force, and could inspire legends across the galaxy. As the fleet moved toward safer space, Elias allowed a small, quiet smile. The The stars stretched infinitely ahead, each one a possibility, a challenge, a future to be claimed. Humans had survived the impossible, triumphed against a seemingly insurmountable foe, and sent a message that would echo across time and space. The human spirit was unstoppable. And somewhere beyond the edge of known systems, new adventures awaited. New challenges, new enemies, and new opportunities to prove that humanity, small yet brilliant, was a force to be reckoned with. Asterisk.